Every single morning at exactly 7:20 a.m., the familiar rumble of the yellow school bus echoed through the quiet streets of Willow Lane. The engine would sputter to a stop, the red lights would flash, and the door would creak open with that unmistakable hydraulic hiss that every child knows by heart. And every single morning, without fail, I would emerge from my small house at the end of the street. My backpack would be slightly crooked on my shoulders. Mom always said I never could get it quite right, and my shoelaces would be half-tied, dangling loosely as I hurried toward the waiting bus. My name is Eli, and I was 8 years old when this story began. 8 years old and carrying a secret so heavy that it felt like it might crush my small chest every time I breathed. The other kids on the bus knew me as the quiet boy who always sat in the same spot, third row on the left, right by the window. That seat had become my sanctuary, my fortress, my connection to something precious that the world could not see. But what puzzled everyone, especially the other children who rode Bus 47 every day, was that I never, ever let anyone sit next to me. Not once. Not ever. The empty space beside me became a mystery that whispered through the aisles of that old yellow bus. Kids would board, scan the seats, notice the available spot next to the quiet boy, and approach with their backpacks and lunchboxes in hand. "Can I sit here?" they would ask, their voices filled with the casual friendliness that children possess so naturally. And every time, I would turn to them with my wide, serious eyes and say politely, "Sorry, this seat is taken." The confusion on their faces was always the same. They would look at the obviously empty seat, then back at me, then at the seat again. Some would glance around as if searching for an invisible person. Others would simply shrug and move on, chalking it up to childhood peculiarities. But I never budged. I never explained. I never gave in. Even when the bus was packed to capacity on those rainy mornings, when everyone wanted to get out of the downpour, I would not allow anyone to claim that seat. Even when my closest friends, Jake Morrison with his freckled face and Sarah Chun with her bright pink backpack, would ask specifically to sit with me, I would shake my head gently and repeat those same words. "This seat is taken." Even when Mr. Peterson, our regular bus driver with his kind eyes and graying beard, would glance at me in his wide rearview mirror with a look that seemed to ask, "Son, what is going on back there?" I would not waver. The seat stayed empty, always empty, perpetually empty, and so the whispers began. "I think Eli has an imaginary friend," whispered Emma Rodriguez to her seatmate one morning, her voice barely audible over the rumble of the engine. "My mom says some kids do that when they are lonely," replied Tommy Watson, nodding with the authority that only a 9-year-old can possess. "Maybe he is just weird," suggested Katie Phillips, though not unkindly. "My cousin does weird stuff too." But the most persistent theory came from Marcus Johnson, a 5th grader who sat in the back and considered himself an expert on all things mysterious. "I bet he talks to ghosts," Marcus would say, his voice dropping to a dramatic whisper. "I bet there's a ghost sitting right there next to him, and only he can see it." The other kids would shiver deliciously at this suggestion, stealing glances at me and my empty seat with a mixture of fear and fascination. But I did not mind the rumors. I did not mind the whispers. I did not mind the curious stares or the way conversations would sometimes stop when I walked down the aisle. Instead, I would simply turn toward the window, press my small hand against the cool glass, and smile softly. A smile that held secrets. A smile that held memories. A smile that held love so deep it could not be contained by the boundaries of life and death. And I kept the seat open. Always open. Forever open. The autumn leaves had begun to turn brilliant shades of orange and gold when everything changed. It was a Tuesday morning, and the air held that crisp promise of winter that makes children think of hot chocolate and warm mittens. At 7:20 a.m., Bus 47 pulled up to its usual stop on Willow Lane. But this morning, something was different. This morning, a new passenger climbed aboard, a woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile, carrying a teacher's bag and wearing a name tag that read Miss Clark. Miss Clark was our new substitute teacher, and she had decided to ride the bus to better understand her students' daily experiences. She was young, maybe in her 20s, with curly brown hair and the sort of face that immediately made you think of warm hugs and bedtime stories. As she made her way down the aisle, her eyes swept across the seats, taking in the controlled chaos of children chatting, trading Pokemon cards, and sharing snacks. And then she saw it, the empty seat next to me. Without hesitation, without knowing the unspoken rule that governed Bus 47, Miss Clark approached my row. She smiled warmly at me, that special smile that teachers reserve for shy children, and began to lower herself into the seat beside me. "Good morning, sweetheart," she said, her voice melodic and warm. "I hope you do not mind if I sit here." But as she placed her brown leather bag down on the seat that had remained empty for so long, I turned to her with eyes that suddenly seemed much too old for my 8-year-old face. "Please," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, trembling with an emotion that adults rarely hear from children. "Not this seat. It is saved." Miss Clark paused, her bag halfway to the floor. She looked at me, really looked at me, and saw something in my expression that made her heart skip a beat. There was pain there. Deep, profound pain mixed with a fierce protectiveness that seemed impossible in someone so young. "Of course, honey," she said gently, gathering her bag and standing up. "I will find another seat." She moved to the row behind me, but I could feel her eyes on the back of my head for the entire ride to school. I could sense her curiosity, her concern, her desire to understand. The bus rolled through the familiar streets, past the park where I used to play, past the ice cream shop that gave out free samples on Fridays, past the library where story time happened every Saturday morning. But I barely noticed the scenery. Instead, I kept my hand pressed against the empty seat beside me, as if I could somehow feel the presence that I knew was there. Later that week, during afternoon recess, Miss Clark approached me. I was sitting alone on the swings, not really swinging, just sitting and thinking and remembering. The playground was alive with the sounds of children playing, laughter, shouts, the rhythmic thump of basketballs against backboards. But around me, there was a bubble of quiet. There was always a bubble of quiet. "Eli," Miss Clark said softly, settling onto the swing beside me. "Can I ask you something?" I looked at her, my small hands gripping the chains of the swing. I had been waiting for this question, dreading it and longing for it in equal measure. "Who is the seat for, sweetheart?" she asked, her voice so gentle it was almost a whisper. The question hung in the air between us like a butterfly that might disappear if I moved too quickly. Around us, the world continued its normal rhythm, but for me, time seemed to slow down. I hesitated. The words were there, locked inside my chest, pressing against my ribs like caged birds desperate to fly. But saying them out loud would make them real. Saying them out loud would make the emptiness official. My voice, when it finally came, was barely above a whisper. "For my sister, Lily." Miss Clark blinked, her eyebrows drawing together in gentle confusion. "Your sister." I nodded, still gripping the swing chains. "She used to ride with me every day. Every single day for 3 years. She would sit right there, in that seat, and we would play games and tell stories, and..." My voice trailed off, lost in memories too precious to share. "Where is she now, honey?" Miss Clark asked carefully. This was the moment. This was the moment when I would have to say the words that I had been avoiding for months. The words that tasted like ashes in my mouth. The words that made adults cry and children go quiet. "Last year," I began, my voice growing even smaller. "There was a fire at our house. A big fire. The kind that makes the sky turn orange and brings all the fire trucks with their sirens screaming." Miss Clark's face went very still. I could see her holding her breath, waiting. "I got out," I continued, the words coming faster now, as if I needed to get them all out before I lost my courage. "Mom grabbed me, and we ran outside, and we were safe. But Lily..." I stopped, swallowing hard. Lily did not make it out. The silence that fell between us was different from the quiet bubble that usually surrounded me. This was a silence filled with understanding, with compassion, with the kind of adult sadness that comes from knowing too much about how unfair the world can be. I looked down at my shoes, the same shoes with the half-tied laces that I wore every morning to the bus. I did not want her to think I forgot, I whispered, so I save her spot, just in case she ever comes back for a ride. Miss Clark's eyes filled with tears. I could see them glistening in the afternoon sunlight, threatening to spill over. She reached out and gently touched my shoulder. "Oh, Eli," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Honey, I am so sorry." I shrugged, the way children do when they are trying to be brave about something that is too big for them to understand. "It is okay. I know she is not coming back. Not really. But," I paused, searching for the right words. "But keeping her seat open makes me feel like she is still with me, like she is still my sister." We sat there in silence for a while, two people on swings, surrounded by the happy chaos of recess, but existing in our own small world of shared understanding. "You know what?" Miss Clark said finally. "I think Lily would be very proud of you." I looked at her, hope flickering in my chest like a small flame. "Really? Really?" she said, smiling through her tears. "You are being such a good big brother." That evening, Miss Clark sat in her car in the school parking lot and cried. She cried for me, the 8-year-old boy carrying a grief too heavy for his small shoulders. She cried for Lily, the little girl who would never grow up, never graduate, never have children of her own. She cried for my mother, who had lost a daughter and watched her surviving child struggle with survivor's guilt. But mostly, she cried because in a world that often seems cruel and senseless, she had witnessed something beautiful. She had seen love in its purest form, love that did not end with death, love that continued to protect and honor and remember. The next morning, when bus 47 pulled up to Willow Lane at exactly 7:20 a.m., something had changed. I climbed aboard with my crooked backpack and half-tied shoelaces, just like always. I made my way to the third row on the left, just like always. I settled into my seat by the window, just like always. But when I looked at the seat beside me, the seat that had remained empty for so long, I gasped. There, placed carefully on the worn vinyl cushion, was a small bouquet of wildflowers, daisies and dandelions and tiny purple flowers whose names I did not know. They were tied together with a piece of yellow ribbon, and they smelled like sunshine and hope and new beginnings. I stared at the flowers, my heart pounding. I looked around the bus, searching the faces of my fellow passengers. Jake Morrison was absorbed in his comic book. Sarah Chun was trading friendship bracelets with Emma Rodriguez. Marcus Johnson was making paper airplanes. Mr. Peterson was focused on the road ahead. No one met my eyes. No one smiled knowingly. No one gave any indication that they had placed the flowers there. But somehow I knew. I knew that someone understood. Someone had heard my story and chosen to honor it. To honor Lily. To honor the love that I carried for my sister. I picked up the bouquet carefully, holding it like the precious gift it was. The flowers were soft against my fingers, and they made the whole bus smell like a garden in spring. From that day forward, everything changed on bus 47. No one ever tried to take the seat beside me again. Not once. Not ever. The other children seemed to understand, without being told, that the seat was sacred. They would glance at it respectfully as they passed, and sometimes I would catch them whispering to newer students, explaining the unspoken rule that governed our little mobile community. "That seat is for Eli's sister," I heard Sarah Chen explain to a new girl one morning. "She died, but he keeps it open for her. It is really sweet." The new girl nodded solemnly, as if she understood the weight of what she was being told. Every few days, I would find something new on Lily's seat. Sometimes it was flowers, wildflowers, roses from someone's garden, even dandelions that had been picked with love and care. Sometimes it was a small toy, a tiny stuffed animal, a colorful stone, a friendship bracelet made of bright threads. Once, I found a hand-drawn picture of two children sitting together on a bus, looking out a window at a rainbow. The artist had signed it for Lily and Eli in careful third-grade handwriting. I kept everything, Every flower, every gift, every small token of understanding. I kept them in a special box in my room, a treasure chest of kindness that reminded me that the world was full of people who understood the importance of love and memory and holding space for those we have lost. Mr. Peterson, our bus driver, never said anything about the gifts, but I noticed that he would glance in his rearview mirror and smile whenever he saw something new on Lily's seat. Once, when he thought no one was looking, I saw him wipe his eyes with the back of his hand. The months passed and the seasons changed. Autumn gave way to winter, winter melted into spring, and spring bloomed into summer. I grew a little taller, my backpack became a little less crooked, and I learned to tie my shoelaces properly. But some things never changed. Every morning at 7:20 a.m., I boarded bus 47. Every morning, I sat in the third row on the left, by the window. And every morning, I kept a seat beside me open for Lily. The other children grew up too. Jake Morrison stopped reading comic books and started playing guitar. Sarah Chin discovered a love for soccer and joined the school team. Marcus Johnson became interested in astronomy and could often be found staring at the sky through a small telescope. But they all remembered. They all understood. They all helped keep Lily's seat sacred. Miss Clark became our permanent teacher, and she would sometimes ride the bus with us on field trips. She never sat in Lily's seat, but she would smile at me and ask how I was doing, and I could see in her eyes that she remembered our conversation on the playground. One day, as we were riding to a field trip at the Science Museum, she sat across the aisle from me and said quietly, "You know, Eli, I think about Lily sometimes. I think about how lucky she was to have a brother who loves her so much." I looked at her, this woman who had become so important in my life, and I felt my heart fill with gratitude. "Thank you for understanding," I said. "Thank you for teaching me." She replied, "You have taught me that love does not end. It just changes shape." As I write this story now, many years later, I want you to know that I am no longer that 8-year-old boy with the crooked backpack and half-tied shoes. I am grown now, with children of my own, but I still remember every detail of those bus rides, every flower that was left on Lily's seat, every act of kindness from my fellow passengers. I learned something important during those months on bus 47. I learned that grief is not something to be hidden or ashamed of. I learned that love is stronger than death, that memory is a form of immortality, and that sometimes the most profound acts of compassion come from the most unexpected places. I learned that an empty seat can be full of presence, that silence can speak louder than words, and that sometimes the most important thing we can do for someone is simply to understand. Most importantly, I learned that Lily did not need that seat to be with me. She was already there in my heart, in my memories, in the love that I carried for her every single day. The seat was not really for her, it was for me. It was my way of processing grief, of honoring love, of keeping connection alive. But the other children on bus 47 taught me something too. They taught me that the world is full of people who understand the importance of respect, of kindness, of making space for other people's pain. They taught me that even children can recognize the sacred and choose to protect it. To this day, whenever I see an empty seat on a bus, in a restaurant, at a movie theater, I think about Lily. I think about love that transcends death, about the importance of honoring memory, and about the power of small acts of kindness to transform ordinary moments into something sacred. Because some spaces, some seats, some places in our hearts are reserved for love that never leaves. And sometimes the quietest acts of love are indeed the loudest.